Hello, friends. Happy Friday. Welcome back to the stream. For anyone who's new here, my name's Lisa, and hopefully going to make this a regular Friday thing. Let me know if you all can hear me. We have been reading articles the last couple of weeks from the New York Times about various topics that I think are relevant to the things that we talk about on this channel, which is sort of women-centered. And last week we read an article about women online, some of the mental health kinds of implications of that. My video this week was about my experience with fitness and my own mental health and my journey and stuff. So I think this article fits really well into both of those topics. And so yeah, hello and welcome everybody. This article is called The Fierce Life and Sudden Death of America's Strongest Woman. It's by John Leland, who writes for the New York Times Metro section. This article is actually in the Metro section. And the subtitle is Rebecca Lorch Found Purpose in Brutal Workouts and Competitive Weightlifting. In the end, it was not enough. So I started to skim this article. It's from January 20th, and I saw it and I just was on the front page. It seemed really fascinating. And as I skimmed it, I said this, would be a very good article for a discussion to see, what ended up happening with this woman. She seems like a super interesting person, and she had her own personal demons that she was fighting. So let's go ahead and get into it. Feel free to say hello. Also, feel free to comment, chat as we go along. I do stop and make comments and read your chats as we go. So, yes, hello and welcome, everybody. The Fierce Life and Sudden Death of America's Strongest Woman by John Leland. And let me know if you can hear me, because I'm not wearing headphones today, and I can't hear myself, obviously. So, all right. Rebecca Lorch was a champion strong woman, winner of the America's Strongest Woman competition in her weight class in 2020. She had a master's degree in nutrition counseling, a roster of training clients, and a romantic history with her coach, one of the top names in their sport. She had a rescue pit bull mix named Bella that had its own Instagram account. That dog was her life, her mother said. On December 18th, 2022, while her mother and stepfather were out celebrating the first night of Hanukkah, Ms. Lorch deleted her social media accounts, removed her face piercings, and ended her life. She was 32. So that is tragic. Right away, I think first thing I'm thinking is suicide is not as common in women as it is in men. Let's see. So men are 80% of suicides in America, and women are only 20%. So I think, women have quite high suicide attempts, but completed suicides very low. So the fact that she was a young person It's really tragic. Hello, Tiffany. Welcome to the stream. And, I actually looked at her Instagram, and maybe we can look at it later. She had a lot of kind of inspirational things on her Instagram about, if you're going through something difficult, keep going. And so you could tell that she was battling something just by looking at her posts. In the close subculture of strong men and strong women, her suicide came as a shock, even amongst those who knew her well. Just 2 days earlier, she had posted a video of herself triumphantly pressing a tremendous barbell over her head, announcing that she was in a happy place. So just 2 days before, she had posted a video saying, she was in a happy place. And hey, Ice Goddess, how are you doing? Um, one thing that I know that's really common in people who have decided to commit suicide and have come up with a plan is that they tend to get a lift because they feel like, they tend to actually get a burst of happiness and joy. And, after, probably years of a dark depression, and it's because they realize it's going to be over soon. Um, so what, in a happy place can mean different things for different people. It might mean that you've come to a peace that you're going to end your life. And this is such a depressing topic. I told my dad I was going to read this article, and he was like, "Can't you talk about something happy?" But I'm hoping that what we get out of this is learning about her life. And, she's just one woman's story, but just sort of like giving it an extra place for her story to live. I think that's really important. Everything seemed to be going in the right direction for her, said CJ Kraus, a friend and fellow competitor who said he talked with Ms. Lorch regularly about her mental health. She had a lot of people around her who cared for her, but it only takes one bad day. What do you think of that? It only takes one bad day. I mean, probably not one bad day. The reasons, I think, and especially with women, probably impulsive suicide is probably really low. Um, um, yeah, I agree. Okay. I know it's sad. Um, but let's see if we can find out about her life, and maybe there's some positivity within that too. Oh, the Joker said he's like, anybody could go crazy if they just had one bad day. Well, again, I think, when it comes to like impulsive decisions and stuff, maybe that's more of a male thing than, you know, I don't know. Okay, let's see. The reasons for a suicide are rarely clear or simple, but Ms. Lorch's friends pointed the finger at her coach and their romantic relationship. Many many sports bodies prohibit intimate relationships between coaches and athletes because of the inherent power imbalance and potential for exploitation, though the main strongman organizations do not. Within days of Ms. Lorch's death, a friend and fellow strongman started a Justice for Rebecca campaign on social media. So she had this relationship with her coach. Apparently, it didn't go well. And yeah, of course, that would be a trigger for depression or suicide. Strongman competition, which often goes by that name even when the athletes are women, is commonly lumped together with powerlifting, but the two disciplines are different. I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about weightlifting, or this is like totally out of my wheelhouse, but I'm interested in learning about it. I know always find it really interesting when women are drawn to weightlifting because it's sort of like is a very stereotypically masculine form of exercise. Because of course, you know, comparing men and women, women are not naturally built for optimal performance in weightlifting because we don't have the testosterone to build muscle the way that men do. So I find it especially interesting when women get into weightlifting. Powerlifting looks like something you can see in any gym, only with exponentially heavier weights. Strongman is something else. Strongman athletes carry 200-pound stones over distances and heave sandbags over a bar. They pull trucks and deadlift automobiles. Wow. For many, the pain and discipline function as emotional therapy. Hello to Lily and Useless Strawberry. Welcome to the stream. We were talking about a female weightlifter who apparently suffered from depression and ended up killing herself. So, very happy Friday topic. But we're trying to learn a little bit more about all of the different intricacies of this case. And I think it's really interesting, this idea of the pain and discipline function as emotional therapy. That almost makes me think of the first thing that comes to mind is another really dark topic, but like cutting or something like that, like self-harm as a way to release like a lot of emotional tension, and people do use it in that manner. So we tend to think of exercise as being well, I tend to think of exercise as being a very positive and kind of uplifting thing, and, it's all about feeling good, and some people do it to want to feel that pain and to push yourself in the discipline. Yeah. Hello, Meg. Welcome to the stream. We talk about being the misfits, said Jackie Zagrans, a competitive strong woman and friend of Ms. Lorch who works as a family therapist specializing in trauma. That's an interesting combination, a trauma therapist and a competitive strong woman. We're not the sleek, wealthy CrossFitters. We're not the technique savvy Olympic lifters. We've got tattoos head to toe. We're a bunch of misfit toys. And the strongman community has always liked it that way. So that's a very powerful thing about fitness, is a sense of community and a sense of I'm with my people. I'm with the other misfit toys. And I know I've personally experienced that feeling. Because I've done competitive triathlon, and it's like this thing that you do by yourself, like 7 days a week, and then once in a while you go to a race and compete, but it's this collection of all these people, and you're like, "I'm with my people." So that sense of community is really strong. For me, also going to yoga or something, I'm with all these people who love the same thing that I love and experience life in the same way that I experience it. Rock climbing for me, another thing that was like that was, going to the cliff, and there's all these crazy people there who just want to get up, you know, on the side of a mountain. So, um, yeah, fitness is a very strong way for people to build community with each other. But what does that draw? That draws people who have troubles. That draws people who have experienced trauma. That draws people who have never felt like they fit in. They finally find this sport and they're like, "Oh, this is what I've been looking for." So here's a picture of Ms. Lorch. She was 32 when she died. She turned to the sport after a devastating injury. Rebecca Ann Lorch discovered the sport after a devastating injury during college, and it became her world. Growing up in Mesquite, Texas in the 1990s, she was the kind of child for whom things came easily, said her older brother Jeremy. She was a Girl Scout and a straight A student who once broke down in tears when she got a B on a test. Everything she did, she was great at, her brother said. And what I hear in that quote is that she was very intense. And it's kind of those people who go after this sort of intense way of living that, you know, can fall victim to depression. Oh, this is such a great comment, Beatrix. Pain you can control is a distraction from pain you can't. Yeah, putting yourself in pain can be a way to um, feel that you're in control. I think eating disorders really goes along with that. To exercise disorders, exercise addiction and wanting to achieve. And Meg says, I knew a girl who had a serious eating disorder and she'd exercise to calm anxiety and purge after eating. Well, exercise is a very strong anxiolytic, meaning it takes anxiety away. People who get an exercise high, it can really make you feel a sense of calm, but you can almost abuse that the way that you would abuse a drug. Beatrix says, I've seen so many people go from anorexia, bulimia, or drug addiction to obsessive athleticism. And it's like interesting because it has that positive kind of aspect to it, right? It's like, oh, I'm doing something good for my body. But where do you stop at the point where it's like, I'm doing something good to now it's like, it's too much of a good thing? I can definitely see that. It's the same kind of personality type. I think they say that a third of people have an addictive personality type, so are prone to addiction. And addiction, of course, in all its forms is so common. Lily says, fitness is great for good mental health, but when people use it in place of therapy, that's where problems start. Mm. When I used to run a lot, I felt like there were times when I was running a lot and there were times when I was running less, and I would actually s I've always gone to psychotherapy my whole life, but I would stop going when I was running more because I felt like I could just kinda work everything out in my head that I was going through just by running without having to think of anything specific, but, it is therapeutic and that can be good, but, it can get to a point where it's not healthy. Meg says, I know there's actually a link between perfectionism, being the top student, and eating disorders, for sure. Huge link. I also think it's about control and keeping control. Definitely. Even then, she was drawn to high intensity experiences. She played full contact football on a team that was almost all boys. The day she got her gear, so that's super interesting. She played full contact football on a team that was almost all boys as a girl. Now then she moved into this weightlifting, which is sort of a boys thing too. The day she got her gear, she invited Jeremy to tackle her. He ran full tilt across the yard and flattened her. I thought that would be the end of it, her mother, Susan Steiner, said. But she got up laughing and said, do it again. At Adelphi University on Long Island, Ms. Lorch majored in theater and joined the Tri Delta sorority. Lauren Callan, her best friend from the theater program, said Ms. Lorch enjoyed the stage because she could become someone else. There's so many like little telling details and elements to this, like this feeling of escapism, maybe using sports and exercise and theater are all ways that we can escape from what's inside us, you know? She was sassy and strong, Miss Callan said. Nothing brought her down. She was almost like a slab of concrete. You can throw it and throw it and throw it, but it's never going to break. Ms. Lorch gave that strength to her friends, Ms. Callan said. When I was in really deep trouble, she would stop everything. Nothing else mattered except what I needed. But just before graduation, Ms. Lorch shattered her leg in a motorcycle accident. Doctors told her she might never walk normally again or even bend her knee. She worked intensely at her rehabilitation and became interested in nutrition, returning to school for her master's degree from Montclair State University. So that is a really significant trauma, physical trauma and mental trauma, being in an accident like that. Beatrix also says, I've got several perfectionist friends who have either battled anorexia or they're exercise addicts. Mm. The gym was a place where she defied limitations. Instead of submitting to her doctor's prognoses, she became a competitive powerlifter and in 2015 competed in her first strongman event. Her coming back from her motorcycle accident was defiance, and it was her way of saying, I refuse to be anything but strong. This is really sad because this woman was so remarkable. Like, said Shelby Jones, a friend who works as a strength coach in California. But she added, sometimes we miss the nuance of how we're making ourselves vulnerable in other ways. Giving yourself permission to be fragile and to defend yourself as a whole person is a lot of work as a woman, especially as an athlete. Mm. Giving yourself permission to be fragile and to defend yourself as a whole person is a lot of work as a woman and especially as an athlete. I think that is such a fantastic quote. I mean, this article is already full of good quotes, but wow. I think that women are really not allowed to show fragility because it's so stigmatized in us. This idea that, you know, women are too fragile and that's one of our faults. So if you sort of admit to fragility or admit that you don't have everything together, that's really a sin as a woman, you know? And but that is part of being a whole person is having that dynamic of some days you're strong and some days you're not, and that's okay. And that's what it means to be a whole person. And, you know, the recurring theme on this channel, like we talk about all the time, is um, giving humanity back to women and, you know, realizing that women are not objects, women are whole people. We're allowed to experience the whole range of emotions as people. And you know, maybe she felt that she needed to be strong and she felt that she needed to be perfect all the time and could never show that side of herself, even when she was going through difficult things like a physical trauma, being in a motorcycle accident. That's an emotional, psychological trauma too. And then they have hinted at this relationship she had with her coach. So here's a picture. Abby Deal, Tyler Purdue, Alec Pagan, and Rebecca Lorch. Mr. Pagan disparaged Ms. Lorch in front of others. Uh-oh, we have a villain has entered the picture. Ms. Lorch advanced quickly as a strong woman, doubling as a nutrition coach for other athletes. She started training with a New York coach named Alec Pagan. Working with her new coach, Ms. Lorch soon became one of the top amateurs in the country. His star, too, rose in the sport. Though Mr. Pagan had a girlfriend, he and Ms. Lorch began a sexual relationship. So it's this guy in the red that was her boyfriend, I guess. Hmm. Okay. Judgment free zone. And no doubt he, as her coach, she was a rising star and he was coaching this rising star, you know. Oh, yeah, I agree. I think, I don't know how other women feel about this, but it's um I don't like to talk in like certainties on things that I don't have statistics about, but how often women get involved with a coach or a mentor or a boss or things like that. A man who's in useless is not afraid to pass judgment on men, and that's fine. Um, but yeah, how common it is for women to get involved with a man who's in a position of power in their lives or who's showing some competency or control or whatever. I don't know. Coaches, like teachers and psychotherapists, enjoy an unequal power relationship with the athletes in their care. They instill self worth and motivation and grant approval, but they can also withhold these to serve their own ends. That almost sounds like an abusive cult leader or something. Um, the coach instills self worth and motivation and approval, but they can also withhold these. That's sick. I mean, I would move coaches if someone is withholding motivation and self-worth and stuff from you. That's literally what a coach's job should be. This imbalance really makes any sort of romance between the two unacceptable, said Lee H. Eigel, a clinical professor at the NYU Tisch Institute for Global Sport and an associate in medical ethics at the NYU Langone Medical Center. Mr. Pagan did not respond to requests for an interview, but his lawyer, geez, David D. Lynn, said that Mr. Pagan's personal relationship with Ms. Lorch began before he became her coach, and he never received any payment to coach her, so she was not a traditional client. So basically, she was his girlfriend that he was coaching. Abby Deal, a strong woman and Ms. Lorch's friend, got to observe the relationship up close. She and her boyfriend shared an Airbnb rental with the couple at the America's Strongest Man and Woman competition in Savannah, Georgia in 2020. That was the height of COVID. I'm surprised they were still doing competitions in person then. Like, just like all travel and stuff was shut down for so long. Maybe it was in January or something. There's like that 2-year missing period in all of our lives, more or less, right? The two women bonded over how we were both with men who we sometimes found difficult to deal with, Ms. Deal said, adding that her partner was not abusive. Um, hmm. Common way that women bond with each other, right? Doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Two women bonding over their crappy boyfriends. Hmm, good reference, Beatrix. Whiplash. Yes, really. You know, why do coaches do that? Why do they, you know, abuse their why do they abuse their people they're coaching? Is it because they have their own psychological, mental issues they're dealing with, or is it to actually try to get the best out of the athlete or student or whatever? And that's how they're doing it. Um, I don't know. That's a good question. Okay. So Lily says, I think it's an ego thing. They want their athlete to make them look good. So you think they're trying to improve the athlete's performance by abusing them? Like, I think, all athletes respond to different um all athletes respond to different techniques of coaching, and some people probably need more gentle touch, and some people maybe respond better with a little more forcefulness. But Useless says, we know negative training for animals is bad, but some do this against human. Negativity does nothing good and always has a backside. Yeah. Positive reinforcement, probably more effective. Beatrix says drunk with power. Even in front of Ms. Lorch, Mr. Pagan would make comments disparaging the status of their relationship. Get out, girl, not the way that you got out. Ms. Steele said she recalled his saying that Ms. Lorch was just some girl he's dating and that he didn't have her in his top 10 of most attractive strong women. Oh my God, this guy is awful. By the way, I haven't read this article yet. I'm like live reacting to it. I skimmed it a little bit. I skimmed it enough to know that it was something that I wanted to read, but I'm saving my reactions for the live stream. Like, that is, oh my God, I want to punch this guy in the face. What the shit? Come on. Ms. Deal and Mr. Pagan also openly encouraged Ms. Lorch to use more performance-enhancing drugs, which are controlled substances requiring a prescription. Yeah, I was wondering if that drugs would factor into this as well. And I know that people here are interested in the topic of transgenderism and stuff that we've talked about quite a lot. And, steroids, which is what I'm assuming she was on. They really have a negative impact on women, on women's mental health and their physical health, energy level, insomnia, all those kinds of things that could put you over the edge, right? If you're already experiencing these, she had so many stressors in her life, this horrible relationship, the stress of being on the top of this niche sport, the stress that comes with having to get to the gym probably for hours every single day to maintain where you're at. She was getting a little older. She was 32, which is probably peak of, in your sport, but the pressure to maintain that pretty significant when you're getting older. Alex said, I can't wait until we can get you on real drugs. This is like super villain stuff, Ms. Steele said, which kind of surprised everybody because Beck was already on a ton of drugs, more than anybody else I knew at the time. Oh boy. Judgment intensifies. Okay. Drugs are not prohibited in strongman competition. They're not prohibited. So this is like a Wild West. And they are widely used, often without medical supervision. But Mr. Pagan pushed them especially hard, said Tom Sroka, who trained briefly with Mr. Pagan. At one of their first conversations, Mr. Sroka said Mr. Pagan asked him if he was willing to take enough drugs to grow a new penis. Gross. This is the New York Times. It goes there. When you push back with him, his whole thing is, well, you don't want to be as good as you say you do because you're not willing to do what is necessary, Mr. Sroka says. Mr. Pagan's lawyer responded, Mr. Pagan never forced drug protocols. Well, I would say telling someone you don't want to be as good as you say you do because you're not willing to do what's necessary, when this whole sport or whatever you want to call it industry, everybody's juiced up, you know. Yep, the sirens and the red flags are just so intense. Like other athletes, Ms. Lorch used the drugs to build muscle and hasten recovery from injury or overwork. But anabolic steroids are also associated with anxiety and major mood disorders, including mania, hypomania, and major depression. And really, what taking steroids does as a woman or a man, it messes with your natural balance of hormones. And, you know, I even think taking birth control is very dangerous for women from a mental health standpoint. It can be. Um, any messing with your hormones in any way is not good. And especially taking what essentially is cross-sex hormones. And by the way, there's absolutely no difference between what a quote unquote trans man would take steroid wise and what female bodybuilders or even male bodybuilders take. As far as when you hear anabolic steroids, they're just talking about testosterone. And like what we learned about in school, you know, in the drug-free program or whatever, is that there's steroids that you get on the black market, but they're really not different, you know, than what you would get from a doctor prescribing steroids. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that this steroid use it's happening in a very widespread way right now outside of the sports world. And yeah, so look, they're associated with anxiety and major mood disorders, including mania, hypomania, and major depression. And yeah, obviously, this article isn't about the transgender thing, and I'm just making that connection because it's something that we talk about very often. But, you know, when it comes to that, a person who's maybe already experiencing those things, whether you're experiencing them from your personality type or working out too much or trauma that you've experienced, or if you're transgender, like, you know, all the things in life that lead up to that, taking something that's going to make those things worse, it's going to make your anxiety worse, make your mood disorder worse, um, causing mania. Mania can be something that tips a person into suicide, because in order to commit suicide, you have to have a certain level of energy and the level of get up and go, you know? That's kind of the fact of that. Um, so it seems very, very, very dangerous to mess with those things. You know, so many women have imbalanced hormones anyways, and we've never really researched a good way um, to deal with that, women's naturally imbalanced hormones. But instead, we're allowing women to inject these things, which are really, really dangerous to them. And in her case, it probably was, I'm guessing, not legal, right? I don't know how you would obtain testosterone legally without saying that you're transgender or something. Now you can, but if you're just an athlete who wants to enhance their performance, I don't know. Ms. Lorch told friends that Mr. Pagan was having sex with other athletes he coached. Where those red flags? Got a few more here. Even while he was mostly living with her in her Brooklyn apartment where she paid the rent and all the bills. Oh my gosh, this guy is a super villain. A super villain. Mr. Pagan's lawyer acknowledged that Mr. Pagan had a sexual relationship with one other athlete, but he maintained that Mr. Pagan and Ms. Lorch had an open relationship. That always works out so great, doesn't it? And that she had consented to his sleeping with other women. Sure, she did. I mean, she's not around to contradict him now in saying that, so I guess he can say whatever he wants about her. He said Mr. Pagan shared in the household expenses. The jacket and medal from a 2022 competition were in Ms. Lorch's room in Connecticut. Susan Steiner holds a photo of her daughter and herself. I guess that's her on the left. She looks pretty old for 32, but I'm going to attribute that to the steroids. Ms. Lorch moved home after she broke up with her boyfriend and coach. I promise we'll do a happy article at some point. This is like such Friday downer. Ms. Zagrans, the strong woman and trauma specialist, saw a familiar pattern in Mr. Pagan's conduct and Ms. Lorch's susceptibility. The coaches say we believe in you, Ms. Zagrans said. You start to believe that in order to be good enough, you have to do what they say. This definitely, I mentioned this earlier, but has like a strong cult vibe, right? You know, cult of two, but still that same kind of dynamic of the person who kind of hooks you in with their belief in you, but then ends up being totally evil and taking advantage of you. In Ms. Lorch's case, Ms. Zagran said, this extended beyond the gym. Who you hang out with, what you do socially, what you do sexually, what drugs you take. It expands and you feel very powerless to stand up to someone like Alec because there is so much fear. Again, a very like cultic kind of thing going on here. But, you know, it's so interesting that a woman who's so physically powerful could be so mentally, emotionally disempowered. And the source of that disempowerment seems to primarily have been this relationship with this man. This is so like we're in an open relationship is the new my wife and I never have sex, so she told me I could see other people. I didn't expect this topic to be so interesting since I'm not a huge sports person, but the bodybuilding community seems so bizarrely misogynistic. Yeah, and it's like this opportunity to be empowering to women because women are always told we should be small and tiny and take up no space, and it's so ugly if we have muscles and stuff like that. And it's like this opportunity to kind of turn that on its head. But look at this incredibly abusive situation this woman wound up in, and she was at the top of this sport. So that's kind of, yeah. Oh, Ice Goddess, the one we're getting talking about FDS. He just keeps getting more and more love. You know, the first red flag, get out of there. I mean, my personal thing is don't get into it in the first place because you don't need it. Did this relationship add to her life? Did it make her life better? No, I think it was a strong contributing factor, it seems like, to why she died. I guess that's what you have to ask yourself. If you're gonna get into a relationship with a man, like, what are you gonna get out of it? What are you gonna put in? What are you gonna get out? I really believe in mindfulness when it comes to relationships with men, whether it's even friends or family members or romantic relationships, if you, for some reason, choose to do that. But what are you going to get out of it? What are you going to put in? What are you going to get out of it? Because you have to believe men look at relationships in that kind of transactional way too. And the second they're putting in more than they're getting out, they're gone. You know, they approach relationships with women as what can I get out of this? You know, why should women not approach the relationship in exactly the same way. She was obviously putting in so much more than she was getting out. She was getting abuse from it. She was getting a negative. She added, and women are so especially prone to it because so many of these women have finally found an outlet for their bodies that isn't about what their bodies look like, but is about what their bodies can do. The idea that you'll be nothing without me is a significant power play. So obviously, she was so passionate about this sport and loved it so much. But then it became entwined with having this abusive coach who was also living at her house and having sex with other women and having sex with her. And, you know, the thing that she loved, this hobby or occupation of doing this sport, became intertwined with this totally toxic relationship. And she probably just didn't see any other way out of it. She couldn't extricate herself from the relationship without also losing this thing that she loved that was her life. She had put her whole life into this sport. In July 2021, as Ms. Lorch was preparing for the World's Strongest Woman competition, she tore a biceps muscle during a workout, putting her out of competition for months. She blamed Mr. Pagan for overworking her on a day she needed a lighter load. He blamed her. He's her coach. So whatever she's doing, ultimately, he's the one who should be accountable for that. Yeah, this guy is slime. He's a loser. I have no issue saying that. Based on this article, this is loser behavior. This is a fantastic comment. Thank you. Yeah, patriarchy doesn't discriminate regardless of how strong you are, and romantic relationships expose some of our greatest vulnerabilities to patriarchy. Definitely. And to those attitudes of feeling like we're not enough or. Yes, it would be isolating to break up with him too if he's a big part of the community, and it's like one of those situations like he's gonna get all their friends or whatever in the breakup. She would be very alienated and isolated. So she was kind of forced to probably to stay in it, or maybe she felt that she was. Andrew Hannes, a strongman, was in a car with her when she got a series of messages from Mr. Pagan. This, by the way, this writer did very good research for this article. When she got a series of messages from Mr. Pagan, one after another, and she was bawling her eyes out, Mr. Hannah said. A switch flipped in Alec, and he was just degrading her. After dropping Ms. Lorch at home, Mr. Hannes did not see her for a few hours. When I did see her again, he said, unfortunately, she was high as a kite, just laughing at the whole situation. Wow. Posting on Instagram a year later, Ms. Lorch wrote, it was in that moment that I decided it was time to leave. Breaking up, though, was hard. She could not compete because of her injury, so she did not have her accustomed outlet for frustration or depression. Okay, so that's another big one too, right? Like when sports become your therapy, then what happens when sports becomes your mental therapy? Then what happens when you can't do it? I've been through that. Probably most athletes who've had an injury have gone through that. This is the thing that's your identity is centered around, your day is centered around, and then all of a sudden you can't do it. It creates this massive hole, and that was your therapy. Now you don't have your therapy anymore. Even athletes who retire experience that too. Like someone like Serena Williams, like you wonder what life is going to be like for her after. A lot of athletes experience that kind of depression after they retire. If they retire at the height of their career and then they're like, okay, what do I do now? It can be very difficult to transition for people. Something has to fill that hole. Okay, so Ice Goddess says, "It's so insane to me how women can put up with this and not have a single 'this is bad' thought. I'm a baby and can't deal with most of the crap men dish out, but this." I think she probably had many "this is bad" thoughts, but the practicality of getting out was probably very difficult, and men can be very manipulative too. Let's not It sounded like he had the perfect setup to manipulate her kind of maximally, right? Um, he was her coach, he was directing her training, and that was her world. So he really tangled himself up, you know? Hello, Taquito. I can see all of your messages. Um, Existential says, "Hell, that happens in normie space too. After my divorce, most of our friends took his side and demonized me, and my divorce was relatively amicable." Ugh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I've had that experience as well with I haven't been in a relationship in 6 years, but the last time I was dating a guy, my whole life became his life and his friends, and I had just devoted so much time to that or whatever. Then, like, when we broke up, that was it. It was kind of like lost all the friends in the process too. So you're not alone. And Dana says, "Sounds like a toxic community she needed to leave." It's like, really, sometimes when you're in a toxic community, we talked about that last week with that online romance novelist community. You don't realize that it's a toxic community that you need to get out of when you're in the midst of it. You just feel like, this is my world. Beatrix says, "I think all humans are transactional, but we're in a massive system that benefits men, hence patriarchy. I think if women were in charge, things would run better system-wise, but this stuff wouldn't stop." I agree with that totally. And yeah, when it comes to sports being your therapy and being your identity and being your life, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Otherwise, you end up a jowly old musician doing the casino circuit. I think it's really important, especially for women, to have lots of different stuff going on. You know, if you're in a relationship with a man, don't make that your whole life and your whole world and your whole identity. If you have a sport that you love, find other hobbies that you love. So because it can happen where things go away, you can break up or you can get an injury and not do your sport or whatever. You need to have other things to fill in the gap. If you have a lot of stuff going in your in your life, that's going to happen really easily. But if you don't, you know, it's a very dangerous setup for depression or worse. Existential says she probably did have those thoughts, but she also thought she'd lose her beloved sport too. He probably made her think that without him, she'd have nothing. Hi, Scottus's toxic trait is siding with the woman in divorce no matter what. And Existential says, "Thanks, Lisa. It bothered me at first, but eventually I legit started telling them, if you think he's so great and that I am stupid for leaving him, you marry him." I hear he's single. Yeah, good call on that. So, posting on Instagram a year later, Ms. Lorch wrote, "It was in that moment that I decided it was time to leave." So, what happened? What happened? She had made this decision to leave finally to get out of this toxic situation. Breaking up, though, was hard. She could not compete because of her injury, so she did not have her accustomed outlet for frustration or depression. Realize I just already read that. Even her best friends didn't know she was struggling, her mother said. I did. She dealt with that just she dealt with that just like she dealt with everything else in life, quietly, alone for a few days, and then she'd cycle out of it. That was just her mindset. By December 2021, she was getting, oh no, this is like so sad. Okay, by December 2021, she was getting blackout drunk in her Brooklyn apartment I apologize for we'll do a happy article next time. And tried to kill herself with pills. She wrote later on Instagram, "My self-worth was so low, I couldn't find a slither of a reason to be alive or bear the pain of the massive shame and self-hate I felt for letting someone treat me so bad for so long." So she wrote that on Instagram, okay? My self-worth was so low. Actually, she survived this horrible relationship and she made the decision to get out of it and she got out of it. And those are good things. And I know sometimes we talk about reframing trauma and the idea of reframing trauma. Some people find that kind of toxic, but look at this. You know, you could think of this situation in two different ways. You could say, um, I felt shame and self hate for letting someone treat me so bad for so long. Or you can say, he was abusive. I was a victim because victimhood is a real thing that exists. And um and I survived it and I got out and I made the decision to get out and that takes a lot of strength and that's not shameful. Being a victim of abuse is not shameful. It should not be a source of shame. And she showed enough self-love to recognize that she had to get away from this abuse even if it took her a while. So I think, there are ways to reframe that trauma rather than kind of go deeper into it. I really feel like, depression is a staircase that you go down. And it's through this kind of really negative self talk that you go down that staircase. And there's no elevator back up. You have to tell yourself these affirmations, even if you don't necessarily believe it at the time, but posting something like that on social media is it's really like a cry for help too, isn't it? Um, but it's also just like there's a different way to frame this. And I understand it's hard. No blame to her at all when you're in it. Especially she was on drugs. She was, you know, signs of alcoholism, suicide attempts. She really this is actually a medical emergency that she needed help with. Professional help, Reframing trauma doesn't, you may not be able to do that on your own. You might need someone to help you with that. Mm, Another beautiful comment. It's kind of absurd how our society teaches women to feel ashamed or bad or embarrassed just because someone else did the chimp brain thing of abusing them. Why do women also take on the shame? She didn't do anything. She let someone do that to her. It's not your responsibility how another person acts. You don't let someone abuse you. They abuse you, you know? Yes, like Yusuf says, I just got chills reading this. I was so strong to leave. I know, I'm like almost tearing up here. Iskata says, I'd let this woman crush me if it means I could hug her. She probably would have made an excellent coach with her experiences. Yes. Yes. Like she could have passed this along to other women in this sport. Why did it have to be men coaching women? That's another. Yeah, here's existential. My toxic trait is I side eye male coaches and teachers working exclusively with young women and girls. Actually, don't think it's toxic, but society does. Beatrix says, it's so important to remind yourself that you trusted a terrible person because you assumed that they like you. You can't blame yourself for believing a really sneaky liar. Yes, men are so manipulative. She was manipulated, but that's not her fault. Not her fault at all. Um, mm, Existential. POS men will lose respect for abuse victims because she let herself be abused. It's nuts. Even if he himself never hit or verbally abused anyone, she's tainted. No empathy, no humanity. Meg says, every time a femicide happens, I hear someone blaming the woman for being in a relationship with a violent man. The worst thing is that it's often women saying this. Mm. I mean, my stance is that these situations are avoidable because you do not have to be in a relationship with a man. That's a totally optional thing. Once you're in a relationship and abuse is happening, you are not to blame ever, 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 ever. Hey, Joan, hope that you're doing well. Okay. This is a great, great comment. Existential says, this is why I don't advocate women revealing their trauma to men in any circumstances. And that is something definitely manipulators look to, right? They look to take advantage of knowing your trauma or knowing that's how they learn to push your buttons is they know your weaknesses. And I think this is a very, very good piece of advice. There's no reason to. Is there a reason to? If you need someone to help you through trauma or something, go to a professional therapist. You don't need to lean on your boyfriend for that, right? You actually don't need to do that. There are professional people who can help you with that. Like, I think people think, oh, I want to get deep into this relationship. But some people even, they do it first, right? It's like the first thing that they do in a relationship is just dump all their trauma on the other person, just sort of like test out the waters. How's this person going to react to it? But now what that person has is ammunition against you to potentially manipulate you in the future. She moved with her dog to her mother's house in Connecticut, where she seemed to be doing better, her mother said. She got a job managing trainers at an Equinox, really high-end fancy gym, and ran her own nutrition and training business, working 75-hour weeks to pay off the debts she ran up when she was with Mr. Pagan. She was dating a new man and getting her strength back after another injury. Ms. Steiner, Ms. Lorch's mother, and Jeremy Lorch, her brother, with her dog, Bella. That dog was her life, Ms. Steiner said. Oh, cute dog. Then in July 2022, she decided to go public about her relationship with Mr. Pagan. Getting it off her chest, right? Was this a good decision, bad decision? Let's find out. In a series of Instagram posts, she accused him of cheating on her with other clients, using her financially and psychologically undermining her, stonewalling, gaslighting, communication tactics that would make me feel like my head was running circles in a hamster wheel, she wrote. So, what do you all think of this? Going public, cost benefit analysis, benefit potentially warning other women about this guy. Cost, calling someone out in public, you maybe open yourself up for potential like libel suit or something like that. If you name them by name or it's very obvious who you're talking about. And benefit, maybe in the short term, you feel good about it. It's kind of cathartic, get it off your chest and stuff like that. Long term, you're like, did I overshare on social media where any stranger could read this? She was a very, very capable person. I really think that, adds to the tragedy in this situation. This is this great, great, great comment. A man is not your priest. Your relationship is not a confessional. You're not lying or being deceptive by not revealing your underbelly. You are allowed to decide how much you reveal. to someone. Dana says therapists are not always accessible or affordable, though. That is true. And they certainly aren't a cure all either. That's where maybe like having good girlfriends to confide in, or your family, or it sounds like she had a supportive brother and a mother, could have confided in them. Beatrix thinks professional therapists are mostly awful too. You got to shop around till you find a really good one. Peanut says, don't ever reveal trauma. So we're all sort of on the same page with that. Dana says it's only libel if it isn't true. Yes, maybe, but it's like, do you want to open yourself up for that? It's kind of dangerous. Existential says, I wouldn't do it, not in a misogynistic climate. A woman is very unlikely to get support, but likely to get doxxed and harassed. I actually totally agree with you on that. Like, do you have to gain versus what do you have to lose from that situation? I get that she felt like she had this weight on her, about the situation that happened to her. But still. Henna says these men are saying she let him abuse her because they're trying to get away with lying about the fact that men are stronger generally and overpower women physically. That's another interesting dynamic to this too, because they were both, these strong weightlifter type people. So they're trying to say she could have stopped him from abusing her. The men are trying to remove accountability. And it didn't sound like it's physical abuse. It sounded like it's mainly emotional, mental manipulation and stuff like that. Pucifer says, I think once I realized you should probably stop trying to connect with men by revealing vulnerabilities and traumas, I ended up seeing the appeal of separatism. Like, what's the point if not that? Totally agree. Great chat, by the way. Thank you all for your comments. It's like fantastic reading what you have to say. Yes, existential, the beginning of the stream. So let's continue on. Let's see how much longer. Oh, we're almost at the end of the article. Okay. Gabby Groshek, who had dated Mr. Pagan before Ms. Lorch did, saw the Instagram posts and recognized the circumstances. I went through the same things she did, Ms. Groshek said in an interview. Mr. Pagan responded 6 weeks later in September 2022 with a letter from his lawyer to Ms. Lorch, what did I say, denying her charges and threatening to sue her for the maximum amount of damages permitted by law. That is what she risked, was a lawsuit. Whether there's any merit to it or not, or he would have won or not, so stressful to get sued, right? And she did open herself up to that. Again, I'm not going to blame this woman for anything. Nothing. However, that's just a fact. And nothing came of Mr. Pagan's threatened suit. But Ms. Lorch's mood started to darken around this time. Her mother said she was more cloistered. She wanted to be around people less. She seemed more stressed, but that could have been the job. Ms. Lorch became increasingly distraught. She told her friends and her mother that she feared Mr. Pagan might come to Connecticut to confront her. She couldn't get away from him, her mother said. Ms. Lorch took certification classes to buy a handgun. Y'all. Unfortunately, I see where this is going, and it's not anywhere good. And texted a friend, I feel fine at my mom's because my stepdad has guns, but I definitely won't move into my own place until I have my own. So she was getting a gun for self-defense, which I do not recommend for any woman because you are much more likely to even kill yourself with your own gun or be killed with your own gun than use it in self-defense. Statistically speaking, only about 10 women a year in America use a gun in self-defense successfully. And how many women are murdered with their own gun or murdered because they live in a house with a gun? Many more than that. And how many women killed themselves with guns. It's not that common, but in her last week, she had dinner with her mother on Wednesday. And I do take every opportunity where it's relevant to talk about that topic of gun safety, gun reform, whatever, and how it relates to women. It's just guns and women are not a good mix. And guns and men are an even worse mix. Okay. In her last week, she had dinner with her mother on Wednesday and worked out at the gym on Thursday, then cooked dinner for her mother and her stepfather. She wasn't great, her mother said, but she was talking and we had fun. On Friday, after completing a heavy lift at the gym, she posted, "Another few pounds back on the bar, another happy place, keep on keeping on." It was her final post. Saturday, she went downhill, Ms. Steiner said. She stayed in bed, saying she did not want to be around people. Sunday, the first night of Hanukkah, Ms. Steiner went to her son's house nearby, expecting her daughter to arrive later. Instead, Ms. Lorch texted to say she was not coming. Ms. Steiner tried calling and texting, but got no answer. Finally, she checked Ms. Lorch's Instagram page to see if she'd posted anything. The page had been taken down. She and her partner arrived home to find Ms. Lorch dead in her bathroom. It is natural to seek a clean explanation after a suicide. Ms. Lorch was dealing with a relationship she considered abusive and the self-recrimination that came with staying in it for 3 years. But she also faced the fear of a lawsuit or physical confrontation, the effects of steroids, the double standard applied to female athletes, 75-hour work weeks, chronic pain from past injuries, plus whatever emotional turbulence or depression she carried with her to the gym. Anthony Furman, a strongman competition who also ran a tournament, said he bonded with Ms. Lorch over their respective traumas, and they became like brother and sister. After she died, he posted on Instagram about his own suicidal thoughts, saying, "Rebecca Lorch saved my life." With her death, he sold his interest in the tournament and started the Justice for Rebecca campaign. She touched a lot of lives, he said. A lot of times this sport does attract people who are already searching for something, Mr. Furman said. It attracts people, that's earlier we're talking about cults, that how destructive that kind of cult relationship can be that athletes can have with their coach. And this is what you would hear in an article about a cult, right? The sport does attract people who are already searching for something, searching. So she was a searcher. It attracts people because it's a community and it's about empowering on the surface. It's about getting strong. It attracts broken souls. When you throw drugs on top of those broken souls like myself, it compounds the issues. I mean, this could not be more of a cult in the description of this sport, just in the way that guy is describing it. United States Strongman is now developing a formal policy regarding harassment and sexual conduct, said William Wessels, the president and owner. He said the organization has banned 3 male athletes since 2020. Ms. Steiner searched her daughter's phone and computer for answers but found nothing that might have set her off. Ms. Lorch's final text was to a friend making plans for the following week. Oh my God, this is so sad. I never in a million years thought Ms. Steiner said, her voice trailing off. "We think this was a very sudden thought process," she said finally. She just suddenly said, "That's it." And because of her personality, she just did it. And let's read this too. If you are having thoughts of suicide, call or text 988 in the US to reach the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or go to speakingofsuicide.com/resources for a list of additional resources. So thank you, John Leland, for that beautifully written article. Wow, really covered um, just so many intricate aspects of the whole case and did a really good job, I thought. Wow. Wowie, what an article. Let me see her Instagram seemed to be up when I looked at it. Let's see. Okay. Go. Let's see. So this was her final post. Another day, another practice session, another few pounds back on the bar, another happy place. Keep on keeping on. 11 months to find my best self again. Oh, what an absolute tragedy, for real. For real. Oh, hi. All right. Well, thank you all for reading that article with me. Beatrix said there must have been other things that she didn't tell everyone. People don't go out and get guns for self-defense unless she has some reason. I think, she had a lot going on mentally. She was on drugs. So there's that. Maybe not the clearest thinking situation. She must have been really down. People who go through with suicide see no hope. My sister's friend did it despite lots of people offering help. Drugs and alcohol definitely don't help for sure. Okay, so Red Blue says, trust me, don't call those suicide numbers. They will make you feel worse, or call the cops and you will be locked up and then want to kill yourself once you get out. Obviously, if you're having thoughts, though, it's a medical emergency and you do need to be removed from objects that you could harm yourself with, right? If that's even crossing your mind. Existential says, I've never trusted hotlines personally because they are volunteer staff. Most people are. Is that you being cynical, or are you saying most people are cynical? Again, if you feel that you're going to harm yourself, then you have to be getting help of some sort. That's an emergency. Although I will tell you just my own personal experience, not to dump trauma and vulnerability. We've talked about like why to not do that. But I did have an experience where I was having a panic attack and I went to the emergency room, as some people sometimes do for a panic attack. And they asked me, do you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or something? Something like that. And I said, I don't know. I just feel out of control or something like that. Like I was just like panicking. And they zipped me right into the locked area of the emergency room, and it was one of the worst experiences of my life, like, hands down. Terrifying, frightening. I was in there for about 8 hours, and then, like, finally they let me go, but only with the promise that I had to do 3 weeks of, what they call partial hospitalization. So, something that I learned, if you do go to the emergency room for a panic attack, be very clear that you do not wanna hurt yourself, because if even leave any ambiguity, you can get shunted towards that, which is bad. Um, Not a place that you wanna be if you if you don't have to be. Um, yeah. So yeah. That article was just I was hoping that by reading that, we would get to learn about this woman, and some of the positive aspects of her life, which I think the article was very beautifully written, and that he did a very good job of, sharing her life with us and her struggles, and maybe some things that we can take away as pitfalls that we can avoid falling into. Um, and that's not victim blaming, right? I don't think that anything that she got into was necessarily avoidable, but you can look, use other people's tragedy as a learning experience. And that's the best thing that can come out of a tragedy, is if someone hears about it and they learn from it and they say, I'm not going to take that same path. The fact that she was drinking heavily and using drugs and had bought a gun, and um those are things that you can recognize as things that you don't want to do if you're in a kind of um, emotional crisis like she was in, and also working so many hours. And yeah, Useless says, an amazing woman capable of so much. Totally agree. Hmm. So, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else that you all want to talk about. I think next week we'll read the article about intuitive eating, because that's been the runner up article for the last 2 weeks. So, I definitely want to read that one next week. That's something. I am an intuitive eater, and I've been doing it for a long time. And it works very well for me personally and my body and whatever. Um, I haven't read the article yet, but I'm looking forward to it and sharing that. I think something like 50% of Americans are on a diet, um, around that number. And probably of women, it's even higher. So, um, thank you for joining us, Lily. Wrapping up pretty soon. Um, cool. So, yeah, I think people will be interested in hearing about that. I want to kind of not like transition into just doing exclusively fitness stuff, but talking more about fitness and diet and body image. Those topics have always really interested me. And one of my favorite topics under the umbrella of radical feminism is like the beauty industry and stuff like that. And all these topics kind of go hand in hand: fitness, dieting, beauty. It's all about women, whether women are really people or whether we are objects. So, mm. Well, we just read the whole article about it. So you could go back and look at the stream, or I have the link to the article in the description box as well if you want to read more about her. But yeah, why she did it, the conclusion in the article was suicide. Doesn't have any kind of cut and dry answers, but she was in a very toxic, abusive relationship with her male coach. So, um, mm, sushi sounds really good. Oh, interesting. The Biggest Loser. Yeah, diet culture, weight loss culture. So much of fitness and women's fitness is centered around weight loss or looking a certain way of being. Oh, I'll put an archive link um, in the description box after the stream, so you can look at the article. You can always go to archive.ph and just copy paste that New York Times articles because they're in there. So if you ever want to read the New York Times without the paywall, I have a subscription, so whatever. I don't really think about it, but anyways, yeah, this is interesting. Captain Meowdy says middle-aged women have always had a high suicide rate to begin with, too. I would not call her middle-aged. She was 32, so I would say that's a young person. I guess I don't know how you would define middle-aged, but is that true? I guess we could look that up. Suicide by age. I mean, my last 3 streams totally got demonetized, and this one will too. So, let's see statistics. I can share this. Sorry if you can hear, my computer is like getting ready for takeoff. I normally have, I put ice underneath my computer to keep the fan from running, but I don't have that today. Let's see. Suicide is the 12th leading cause of death in the US, resulting in the death of 45,000 Americans, almost 46,000. 1 million attempts, 1.2 million attempts. That's kind of crazy. Highest amongst middle-aged white men. Men are 3.8 times more likely than women. Firearms, 52% of all deaths. It's actually going down a little bit, or it was through 2020. Age range, I don't think they have it broken out by sex, though. Goes way up. 85 is the highest. The over 85 group. That's kind of crazy. All right. Oh, sorry to hear that. Tragic. I agree. To me, middle age is like 50 to 60 or something. Yeah. Ice Goddess says 50, 55. Living pretty long. All right. Well, I don't know. I don't have a lot else to talk about. Yeah, next week we'll be doing the article about intuitive eating. So hopefully that'll be a little bit more upbeat. I think it will be. Um, but I did want to share this article because I saw it and I said, this woman just seems so remarkable. She seems like just such a standout kind of woman, and the kind of, women we can learn a lot from her experience. And I think that that's just so, so important. I'm working on 2 videos right now. Basically, okay, I know when people say they're going to do stuff on YouTube, they never end up doing it, but I would like to be posting a video on Tuesdays, like a video that's on a topic, a little short essay or something like that, and then streaming on Fridays, and then if there's little clips that I want to post from the streams, do that on Sundays. So that's sort of my schedule. I also want to make shorts, but I don't know where that's going to fit in. I've been wanting to do that for a really long time. I watch a lot of shorts, but I don't know how that I can fit that into my whole thing. But this week's essay I'm working on about Miley Cyrus and her new song and her history of how she was really exploited as a child. And I think the new song, if you've heard it, Flowers, is really, it's a great song. It's a total bop, very, very fun to listen to. And I think the lyrics are super, super empowering. And the song, just the song itself on its own, I think it is a women going their own way anthem. I think it's a great song. It's got a really positive message. I don't need a man. I can do everything for myself. And I love that message. Once in a while, a song like that gets super popular. It's the #1 song in America right now. #1 song on Spotify ever of all time, which is insane. And it's about her divorce from, well, basically, it's like a breakup revenge I don't need a man type song. And I think that's awesome. But the video, if you've seen the video or if you haven't, maybe go watch the video, um, is so sexual. It's like pornographic. And so I want to kind of write down, I've been taking some notes and stuff. I had a little writer's block. I tried to write yesterday and like nothing came out. I was like, what is going on with me? Because that doesn't normally happen. But I want to write about why women's independence and women's hypersexualization are often the same thing. And it's kind of maybe goes back to the 1960s of like women's liberation being equated with women's sexual liberation. And there's just a lot of jumble in my mind. Oh, yes, thank you. I actually I like the daytime stream, and I think it's good for the Europeans. Um, Miley Cyrus and empowering is shocking since she is all woo woo. Well, something that I want to say about her is that, and I think I'm going to open my video by saying this, is that, in radical feminism, women are not off the hook for, promoting things that hurt women, which like hypersexualization does, like unquestionably. Presenting yourself in a sexualized manner has a negative impact on other women. However, Miley Cyrus gets a lifetime pass from me. I would not blame her in this situation at all. And the reason is because she did not have a normal upbringing at all. And she was really exploited in a very disgusting way. She was photographed and her picture put in Vanity Fair magazine, which was 15 years old, of her undressed on a messy bed, which is disgusting. And it disgusts me actually that adults were involved in that decision-making process to make that happen. And then she was shamed for that as a child and made to apologize as a child for participating in that. and none of the adults apologized, but she did. And that's my reasoning of why I will never blame her for presenting a hypersexualized image, even though I think it's wrong for women to do that. And it does have a negative impact on her and other women. But I cannot blame her. Yeah. She was groomed. She came from the pop star conveyor belt. I'm talking about this. Hold on. Oh, I'm still sharing my screen. Oh, it was on the cover? I didn't even realize that was on the cover. I thought it was just in the magazine. That's so gross. Let's see. This picture. She's 15 years old. That's a little baby child. That is so wrong. That to me, that's child pornography. Disgusting. Disgusting. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. And then I'm also working on a video about winter wellness, how we can take care of ourselves in winter, specifically for us women going our own way. But any woman, I think, will be able to benefit from that topic. So that is what I am working on right now. And then, yeah, stream next week will be on intuitive eating. And yeah, if anyone has anything else you want to bring up in the chat, or if there's ever any articles or topics that you want to discuss or want me to read, always feel free to let me know about that. And yeah, I don't have too much else. So I'll just say thank you all for a wonderful chat. So many insightful comments. Really appreciate that as always. I'm also really proud, like I made that community post, that my last bunch of videos have had 100% likes, which is a really big accomplishment on YouTube, actually. Also, nice to know the trolls are gone. Yes, we can all breathe. So yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. See you then. Bye.